Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Hello everybody, how you doing? My name is Peter Meliaris and I am going to be talking briefly today about isometric exercise. So isometric exercise was a hot topic at the recent International Tendinopathy Scientific Symposium, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit today. Before I do launch into that, I'm just going to mention that we're launching the updated version of the Mastering Lower Limb Tendinopathy online course. That will be in December, so look out for that. So basically, isometrics has become popular since the Rio et al. Paper looked at N=6 patellar tendon participants and found that they all had a dramatic reduction in their pain with during single leg decline squatting, and that was following an isometric 45 second by 5 70% MVC, MVC being maximal voluntary contraction intervention. It was sort of on a leg extension machine, I guess you could say. So everyone had a good response. I think the overall effect was something like 4.5 points on a numerical rating scale, which is a massive effect, far greater than the minimal minimal important difference, which is about 2 points. So that started this big sort of interest in isometrics, and the other thing they found is that it was superior to isotonic in bringing about that response, and it also led to a reversal of cortical inhibition, so hinting at a mechanism. So that was definitely a groundbreaking paper and contribution to the field, and I think that does need to be recognised. One of the interesting things was the lack of variability between people. So everyone had the same response. So they sort of had a group of responders, I guess you could say. So recently we published a paper looking at the immediate and short-term effects of short and long-duration isometric contractions in patellar tendinopathy, so similar cohort. And what we were interested in is understanding whether you do need to do long-term contractions of the sort of 40-45 second duration, and we compared this to a 10-second duration, and we equalized the overall time under tension. And what we found is that there wasn't actually a difference in immediate response in pain, and we measured this on the single leg decline squat as well as the single leg hopping task. So people did have a reduction in pain following the isometric task, so pain got better, but it got equally better whether they did a long or a short duration isometric contraction. So that was interesting. We also found that there was a very modest effect, so something more like a 1 to 2 point change in pain rather than a 4 to 5 point change in pain. And this is because there was variability. It's important to note that some people in our study didn't respond to the isometric intervention. Their pain stayed the same before and after. So what we're starting to see, the narrative that is emerging with this, is that maybe there is variability in people, so between participants, which you would imagine is the case. Not everyone's going to respond the same to an intervention. So there is variability, and again, understanding the people that respond, perhaps the people that were in the Rio et al. Study, I think is important. So moving on, another study that's been published this year. This study has been around for a long time and is a really great study, and I recommend you read it. It's by Seth O'Neill from Leicester, published this year, but he did present it at International Tendinopathy Scientific Symposium 2 years ago, so 2016. And he's taken 9 people with Achilles tendinopathy, and he's done an isometric contraction, which is basically identical to the Rio intervention, but he's done this on what he calls a physiometer, which is basically a Wii Fit board set up to do isometric MVCs. So he's done that with these Achilles patients, and he's shown, again, quite marked variability in response. So some people get better, but not by much, like we found, maybe by a point or two. Some people don't change, some people get worse. So it's interesting, and it demonstrates that humans basically display variability in response to things unless you're able to understand and pick the responders, which I don't think we know yet, who they are. Is it people who have more baseline pain or less baseline pain that are going to respond more? Is it different pain mechanisms? Is it different joint positions? Certainly it doesn't seem to be different duration of contractions, because that was our hypothesis in the study that we published this year, and that didn't show a difference. So clearly, some people are responding to these interventions and some people are not, and we don't understand why. Is it psychological factors? Is it their fears? Is it their beliefs? So we need to understand this a little bit more. So that is the Achilles study that is out there at the moment. The last study that I want to talk about is by Henrik Riehl, and he presented and won the best abstract best podium presentation prize at the International Tendinopathy Scientific Symposium that just passed in Groningen. This is a really interesting study. It's on plantar heel pain, and what Henrik has done here is he has compared 3 groups. He's compared isometric. Sorry, that's completely wrong. He has one group that has done 3 tasks. So similar to our study where we've got the same group to do the short and long duration contractions in a crossover trial. He's done the same thing, but he's had 3 crossover tasks: isometric intervention, isotonic intervention, and walking intervention. And he has shown here that there is great variability. Really marked variability in response to loading for all the tasks. No single task demonstrated a significant reduction or increase in symptoms overall because of the great variability between people. Some people respond, some people don't respond, some people get worse. So that's, I think, a really interesting contribution. And again, it really highlights that we need to understand variability in response. And these papers do, if you read them, they do go into what may explain the response, but there's no factors that are emerging clearly as yet, I believe, and possibly because most of these studies are having relatively small sample sizes. So I'm sure we'll hear more from these groups. There's lots of great people who are doing this work. So Bill Vizencino from UQ was involved in the Riehl study. Michael Rathliff, I believe, is involved in both the Seth O'Neill as well as the Riehl study. So this is an area that I think is worth exploring further. And the reason it's worth exploring further is because a couple of reasons. First, it's good to give people a short-term break from their pain if we can understand what interventions will achieve that, or who will respond, because then they can do activities they like sport or other things, in the periods after. The other important reason, in my opinion, is to help people understand that loading is potentially positive. If you can show someone in a clinic context that you can do an exercise and it improves their pain, they're much more likely to do exercise as an intervention. and which will overall in the long term improve their tolerance to load. So I think there are reasons to really try and delve into this and understand this relationship. And I think it's an area that we'll learn a lot more about in the coming weeks and months and years. Well, more likely years, given how slowly research evolves. Fantastic. So thanks a lot, guys. I have stuck to 10 minutes. Hooray. So it's actually under 10 minutes, this podcast. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.